Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to Reefs Go Live. We're so happy that you joined us today for another live episode from Meadows on Little Cayman. My name is Ryan McLaughlin. I'm the Education Assistant here at CCMI. I'll be your topside host today, joined alongside Connor Childs, who is our Ocean Science Scholar, Marine Education Intern, and he will be your underwater host. So let's go ahead and say hello to him now. Hi, Connor.
Hello everyone joining us from around the world. We're so happy to have you back with us on the incredible coral reefs of Little Cayman. During today's episode, we want to hear all from you. So ask us questions, share your comments, and let me know if you see anything cool swimming behind me, and we'll try our best to reply to as many of your messages as possible. So, to get us started today, let us know where you're tuning in from and why you think scientific investigation is so important.
That's right. We would love to hear from each and every one of you. Now, you might be curious how Connor will be able to respond to your questions live from underwater. As you can see, he is wearing specialized scuba gear that allows him to hear me and talk to you guys about all the fascinating details of the reef. So today we're going to be discussing with you guys why investigation and exploration is so important for our oceans as well as our society at large. We'll also be talking about how CCMI has been making a positive difference in our oceans through the research and conservation efforts, and why there is still so much to actually be explored. Now, to bring you this live broadcast, we have a whole team from CCMI, both up here in the boat and below water. We're going to be checking in with them throughout the broadcast, so let's go ahead and say hello to them now. Alright everyone, let's meet some of you. So we have Kai from Indiana joining in. Stephanie says hi to Connor with the grade 11 students at CIS. We have MMPS Year 2, Curtis and Bowden from Georgetown, Grand Cayman. And we have ENS M Moyle Primary joining us as well. So it is so lovely to have all of you with us today, so let's jump into it. So you may think that all of the exciting exploration in our oceans may have already been completed, and a lot of it was done back before the 17th century, in a time known as the Age of Discovery or the Age of Exploration. But this isn't the end for us great explorers. Right, Connor?
That's right. Did you know that the ocean covers about 70% of the Earth's surface? But more than 80% of it still remains unexplored? This is because places like the deep sea are particularly challenging to explore. If all you clever students remember our lesson from the last Reefs Go Live event, the deep sea is pitch black, extremely cold, and under enormous amounts of pressure from all the water piled up on top of it, all making it even harder to explore than outer space. All very different from the crystal clear blue water you see around me. So, Ryan, what percentage of the ocean do you think we actually have good knowledge on? And what do you students have to say as well?
If I had to take a guess, I would say we have good knowledge on about 20% of our oceans, but let's see if anybody in our audience has a better idea. Let's give them a moment to pop those answers in the chat.
That's a great guess. I'm looking forward to see what all you students have said as well. And when you look around me, we do know a lot about all these creatures. For example, this coral you see here, we know that it has an algae living inside its tissues called zooxanthellae. It has a symbiotic relationship with this, meaning that both the algae and the coral benefit off each other. The algae provides the corals with 95% of its food, and in return, the corals provide the algae with a safe place to live. But I want to know what you students have guessed.
So we have a few guesses that have come in. Some people have said potentially 12%, 45%, or even up to 89% that we actually have a good understanding of. Those are some really good guesses. Connor, was anybody able to get it right?
No, unfortunately not, but those were all great guesses. So despite our incredible advances in technology and exploration over the past few decades, we only have good knowledge on about 5% of our oceans, with minimal knowledge on another 10%. Some scientists actually believe we know more about Mars than we do about the oceans on our own planet.
Wow, we've still got so much more to explore, and investigate. On that note, we have some answers from our audience on why you guys think investigation is important. One person says to help us save the ocean. Or to allow us to keep catching fish for fisheries. So those are some brilliant reasons why investigations in our oceans is so important. A lack of exploration leads to challenges in protecting marine areas where there is little knowledge of what exists there, because if we don't understand what happens in these deep ecosystems and the processes that control life down there, the health of these environments can be threatened from our human actions. What we don't know really can hurt us and other animals and plants. Right, Connor?
That's right. Without knowledge of these unexplored regions, we cannot manage our resources correctly, potentially leading to overexploitation and ecosystem destruction. The unknown aspects of these mysterious ecosystems mean that we urgently need further exploration to address critical gaps in our understanding.
And that's why we need more great investigators and explorers just like you. The boundaries of what we thought is possible is being challenged as we speak. Connor, do you know of any recent exploration or discoveries that have happened in our oceans?
Yes, NASA is currently exploring the deep sea to find clues about oceans on other planets and potentially even work to search for alien life. Isn't that amazing? Very recently, the Schmidt Ocean Institute made a discovery of over 100 new marine species on an underwater mountain near Chile. This is very similar to the work CCMI is doing on the offshore seamounts of Grand Cayman. This all goes to show the importance of investigation and exploration on biodiversity and ecosystems, especially in remote or poorly explored areas. Isn't that right, Ryan?
Absolutely. While significant progress has been made in ocean exploration, there's still so much to explore and understand about the vast majority of our ocean so that we can protect it from years to come. Okay, let's do an underwater check-in with our group. How are you guys doing down there?
We're great down here, Ryan. Thanks for checking in.
Wonderful. So we've spoken about the unexplored parts of our ocean, and we've touched on why research and investigation are so important. Before we move on to the next section, can all of you in the audience today start thinking about some of the threats and challenges that are facing our coral reefs? Connor, looking around you on the reef, can you give us some reasons why our oceans and reefs are so important to us?
I'd love to, and look around me right now, I can start to think of quite a few. So these big structures of coral reef act as a great natural barrier against storm surge and strong waves. They absorb that wave energy and protect our coastlines and ultimately protect us. Also, all this gorgeous marine life you see around me supports tourism through diving and snorkeling, which supports families in coastal areas. Also, all these beautiful fish you see as well provide a food source for millions of people worldwide, providing protein to communities and supporting fisheries. Not only this, but coral reefs are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. They provide crucial habitats for countless species of fish, plants, microorganisms, all supporting the ecosystem balance and resilience. Ryan, can you think of any other reasons why our oceans and reefs are so important?
So those are some really important reasons that you gave to us. While there are too many reasons to actually mention now, I've got a few more. The ocean plays a vital role in regulating our climate. The surface of the ocean absorbs a lot of heat that enters our atmosphere from the sun. This is then carried around by the currents, which helps to regulate our temperature and climate, keeping things just right for life to thrive in our ocean. The ocean also acts as a big set of planetary lungs. So normally we think of lungs as breathing in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. The ocean actually absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releases oxygen that we need to breathe. So it is one of our largest oxygen providers. It gives about 50% of the oxygen that we actually require. This is done by tiny little marine plants called phytoplankton through a process known as photosynthesis. They absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which helps to lessen the impacts of climate change, which we'll be able to discuss a little bit later. So we know that our oceans are really important for the health of all humans and the environment. Let's see what you students think about the threats and challenges our oceans are facing today. So Stefania says ocean acidification, coral bleaching, microplastics, and changes to food webs. We also have for threats from MMPS, says throwing plastic in the ocean isn't good for animals or corals. Okay, one more. So from Endemol Primary is asked if phytoplanktons are under threat as well. So we'll talk about all of this stuff. So I can see some real thought went into those answers. Well done. Now that we know how important they are to us and our planet, let's talk about some of the threats our coral reefs are facing. Connor, why do we have so many threats?
A lot of the threats we're facing today is because our human population grew and grew and grew to a point where we're now taking over 8 billion people on this planet. If we all stood shoulder to shoulder, we would stretch around the entire Earth over 334 times. Because of this enormous population, we now need more food, more houses, and more stuff for all of these people. This uses up a lot of resources like water, energy, food, and land, which puts a strain on our environment, including our oceans.
That's right. Approximately 75% of the world's coral reefs are currently threatened by a combination of human-caused stressors. These include ocean warming, ocean acidification, and overfishing. Without significant changes in human activities, it is estimated that 90% of our coral reefs could be lost by the year 2050. Connor, can you tell us a bit more about some of these?
Ryan says because we are consuming so much more, we now need to produce so much more to meet these demands. Far too much carbon dioxide from fossil fuels is being released into our atmosphere and as more energy and more stuff is made. All getting trapped and is causing our planet to warm up far too fast, like putting a lid on a warming pot. As we touched on earlier, the oceans absorb heat, acting as a heat source for our planet. And with all of this heat going into our atmosphere, it is causing our oceans to warm at a dangerous rate. With rising sea temperatures comes coral bleaching, where corals lose the algae living in the tissues, causing them to turn white and making them more susceptible to disease and death. Well, I'll try to find you an example of a bleached coral. Ryan, can you explain ocean acidification to our students?
I would be happy to. So, ocean acidification is a big problem for our marine creatures. It happens when the increased levels of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere are absorbed by the ocean, making it more acidic. This changes the levels of one ingredient in the ocean, harming many marine creatures. We can specifically look at corals and shellfish, which have a very hard time to build their hard calcium carbonate skeletons and shells. So, Connor, were you able to find us an example of a bleached coral on the reef?
No, I didn't, but let's compare this healthy one. When corals become bleached, they become weak and more vulnerable to diseases. And without their colorful algae friends, they have less food, and many corals eventually end up dying. That means all these beautiful fish end up losing their homes. Speaking of fish, Ryan, do you want to talk to us about the next big threat our oceans and coral reefs face?
Yes, let's talk about overfishing. So, overfishing is when us humans fish and fish and fish, sometimes with destructive gear like trawls, to the point where once healthy reef fish populations are nearly depleted. Nearly 34% of global fish stocks are estimated to be overfished. Removing too many fish from the ocean affects the entire food web and other species that potentially rely upon those as a food source. Our last threat that we're going to be talking about today is pollution, which can come from many different sources, such as large-scale farming runoff into waterways, sewage, and plastic waste, all of which can be very harmful to coral reefs. So it's basically like making a mess in their coral reef homes, like leaving tons of harmful chemicals and plastic waste, which would basically be us doing the same thing all over our own home, which none of us would like. Right, Connor?
That's right. Coral reefs are like bustling cities for fish, sharks, crabs, turtles, and so many more other cool creatures. Just look around me right now. I can see some yellow-headed rats, which despite their size are still valuable members of the ecosystem. However, when these corals become damaged, these animals lose their homes. So, let us know whether you bright students have any ideas on how we can help fight against these threats, like climate change, overfishing, and pollution. Ryan, as a real-life scientist and conservationist, what do you do to help fight against these threats?
Well, I vote for leaders in government who actually care about the environment. I recycle my rubbish, and I try to eat sustainable seafood where I know it's been caught. Actually, we're going to put a link in the chat to help you guys identify sustainable seafood. Connor, what do you do?
Amazing. Well, I've tried to significantly cut down on my use of single-use plastics, like straws, plastic cups, and plastic bags. I've really come to understand that we hold a lot of power in our decision to support local shop owners who use earth-friendly products instead of big corporations who use unsustainable methods to make and deliver their products.
You're so right. Each and every one of you can impact our world in a positive way through the decisions that you make. Let's see what you all had to say about how you would fight climate change, overfishing, and pollution. So we have people saying that they would just end up using less plastic in their day-to-day lives, which can make a big difference. Also, taking less flights to help reduce their carbon footprint. This is definitely a big one, especially if you look at a lot of private flights that go around. And then also eating less meat. So yes, a lot of land and a lot of resources go into raising livestock for food for us. So let's do another check-in with our underwater team. Connor, how are you guys doing?
We have no complaints down here, Ryan. It's another beautiful day underneath the water on the reefs.
Sweet. So those are some awesome answers from you guys. We're so lucky to have ocean heroes like you who care about our oceans and coral reefs the same way our ocean scientists, educators, conservationists, and explorers do. Right, Connor?
That's right. Their characters through their research and investigation. It helps us understand these delicate marine ecosystems, like their complex food webs, their functioning, and their response to these threats. These ecosystems have delicate food webs of interconnected organisms. At the bottom, we have plants that use sunlight energy to produce food. That would be phytoplankton, seagrass, algae, or even the zooxanthellae in these corals here. Then we have herbivores, like the parrotfish, that eat these plants. Then we have predators, like sharks, that eat other animals. Those are called carnivores. Then right at the end, making this big, beautiful circle of life complete, are the detritivores. They eat on dead or decaying plants, animals, and other organic waste. So the plants are eaten by the herbivores are eaten by the carnivores, and everything is eventually eaten by herbivores, all supporting the balance of life.
Wow, isn't that just amazing? An investigation helps us understand the dynamics of these food webs to help us predict how changes in one species or trophic level can affect the entire ecosystem. But with all of the threats that our coral reefs are facing today, these stressors have big impacts on the health and resilience of these ecosystems, which is why research helps us to develop strategies and solutions for a healthy ecosystem. This is exactly what CCMI is doing. But before we move on to some of the important work that CCMI is doing, let's take a minute to find out if any of you have any questions. So, Connor, we have a question from Jeffrey who's asking how deep you are underwater.
That's a great question, Jeffrey. Right now I'm sitting at 28 feet beneath the surface.
So we also have a question from Sarah from the UK, asked how fishing can be more sustainable. So some practices of fishing are more sustainable and use less destructive gear, and they also take set amounts of fish at set times. So that would also be some of the information that's going to be included in the chat, in the link for sustainable seafood and knowing where it's been caught. So we also have the question about, is there still hope to save our reef? Yes, there is still hope to save our reef. A lot of the small actions that you can take, it may seem small, but it does build up over time. You can take local and global action, doing small changes in your day-to-day life that help reduce the amount of energy as well as the plastic usage that you use. So we have the question from Edmund Primary asking about how quickly can bleached coral recover. So in a bleaching event and that coral loses its zooxanthellae, which gives it its color, that zooxanthellae is then still floating in the water column. If that coral is able to survive the bleaching event and you don't see algae start growing over the coral, it is still alive, and if that bleaching event or whatever the stress factor in the environment, so if we're talking about ocean warming, so high water temperatures, if that temperature starts to drop and that coral has survived, it is able to reincorporate that zooxanthellae back into its system, as long as it doesn't have algae growing over it. So if it makes it through a stress event, it does have a good chance of actually surviving. Alright, thank you everyone for those questions. So we're coming down to the last little bit of our broadcast. So Connor, we would love to hear from you about some of the research that CCMI is doing.
Certainly. At CCMI, we believe in a world of vibrant oceans and healthy coral reefs. We aim to make this a reality by undertaking cutting-edge, impactful research and turning it into real-life conservation and education. We call this turning knowledge into action. In fact, CCMI are trailblazers in the region, working to reverse the declines of coral reefs through our research into coral health. This includes our most recent research project into the role sea cucumbers play on the ecosystem, a project that was made possible by the UK government's Darwin Plus program.
So that is a really great initiative. But before we explain more on this topic, Connor, can you find an example of a sea cucumber on the reef for us?
No, unfortunately not. But here's a picture of one on the screen for you now. These sea creatures might not look like they're doing much, just lounging on the sea floor. But really, they're making a difference in our coral ecosystems you wouldn't even imagine. They play a crucial role in maintaining coral health, growth, and resilience to climate change. Isn't that right, Ryan?
That's right. So remember the important detritivores that we just talked about that eat dead and decaying matter? Well, sea cucumbers are a great example of these. So they are like street sweepers of the reef. As they move across the sand, they eat it up, eating all the detritus and potentially harmful bacteria that can make coral sick. This helps to lower the risk of coral disease. Not only that, but when sea cucumbers feed on the sediment, they also process it through their digestive tract. What comes out the other end? Well, you get calcium carbonate and ammonia. So, Connor, can you explain to our viewers why this is so important for reef health?
I'd love to. So, calcium carbonate is like a building block for the coral reefs. And when sea cucumbers release it into the water through their poop, it helps corals grow stronger and faster. Additionally, calcium carbonate helps make the oceans less acidic, which is crucial in combating the effects of ocean acidification that we touched on earlier. As for ammonia, it's like a nutrient boost for the reef, enhancing productivity and supporting overall health of the ecosystem.
Alright, so we have a few more questions that came in. I'm going to answer them before we move on to the next section. So from year 2, MMPS asks, how long does it take for corals to grow? So it can really vary by the species. Some of the corals out there grow super, super slow. So a lot of the corals that you see are going to be these big dome structures that can potentially grow maybe up to a centimeter per year. So when you see these huge structures out on the reef, they've potentially been there and growing for hundreds of years. On the other hand, we do have corals, like the ones that we're looking at in our nursery, that potentially can grow up to 10 or 20 centimeters per year for the entire colony, so a lot faster. So it really varies upon the species you're looking at and how they actually grow in the ecosystem. From Edmund Memorial Primary, we also have what helps to keep the algae in check. So a lot of that is primarily going to be by the herbivorous fish that are swimming about the reef. So as they swim around, they're going to be eating little pieces of the algae off of the reef, and they're going to be the primary ones that help to keep that algae that you actually see out on the reef in check and keep it down, so that way potential recruits from new corals have a safe place to land and then grow on the reef. And then Steve from Cayman Brack says that they don't see mouths on sea cucumbers, so how do they actually eat? So sea cucumbers actually have, basically it's a tube with a hole at each end. One side is going to be their mouth. Inside of that, they can have these appendages that are highly branched. Most of the time it's going to be inside and you're not going to see them. But sometimes they'll extend those out and they'll basically kind of pull in sediment or catch things passing in the water column, which they'll then pull back into their mouth and then take off of those appendages. Okay, so we're going to keep moving along here. So coming off of Connor's last section, now you might wonder now how we know a lot about all of this research. Well, we can thank the researchers at CCMI who have been doing in-depth studies on sea cucumbers and how they impact sediment and coral growth. They were able to do this by using specialized underwater cages where they're able to compare how corals grow in environments with and without sea cucumbers. The results from this study actually showed that corals would grow faster and healthier in the presence of sea cucumbers, showing just how vital these are to the well-being of the reef.
Remember, they're not just a strange sea creature, they're the silent guardians of our coral ecosystems, working tirelessly to ensure the health of our underwater world. Okay, so, before I wrap up today's episode, Ryan, shall we give some last shout-outs to our students?
Yeah, let's do some last-minute shout-outs. I also have one other question that I'm going to do really quick. So, Edmund Memorial Primary asks, when corals are damaged by natural events, can they be broken off or can the corals reattach? So the unique thing is, and some of this will be covered in our next episode, but some of the corals, if a piece breaks off and it is carried in the current or elsewhere on the reef, wherever it lands on the reef, it has the potential to start to regrow from there, and that is one way that corals can actually reproduce, is if a fragment pops off and is broken off during a storm, wherever it lands, it is able to potentially regrow in that area. So just because it breaks off in a storm does not mean that it's going to die. It still has the chance to potentially regrow and live somewhere else. Which one? So from Jeffrey Pineling asks, can corals turn into fossils? So they definitely can. So it's very unique along here. So a lot of the area around the island, we have something that we call iron shore. So it's really, really old reef. And when you walk along the iron shore, you can actually see the outlines or the remnants of a lot of the different coral species, and sometimes the impressions in the iron shore is actually strong enough that you would be able to identify specifically what species of coral you were looking at on some type of prehistoric reef. And then from Edna and Moyle Primary, they say go see cucumbers. So we are almost out of time. Connor, can you give our students a recap of what we taught during the day?
Absolutely. During today's lesson, you students learned about the importance of the coral reefs and the threats they're facing today, and how CCMI's innovative research and education work is helping to save these coral reefs. You've also learned how our human impacts can really have long-lasting effects on our oceans and reefs, both positively and negatively.
And most importantly, we hope that you students joining us today leave this lesson knowing that you can make a positive difference and you can start today. Okay, I'm afraid that is all the time we do have for today's live lesson. Thank you all so much for joining us on Little Cayman to learn about about research on the reefs. Anything else you would like to say, Connor?
Yes, we have so loved having each and every one of you with us today. And we can't wait to see you again for our next Reefs Go Live event on May 8th, where we'll talk about reproduction on the reef, which is sure to be a super interesting one.
So from right before we go, somebody asked, other than sea cucumber impacts, is there any other data that is currently being collected at CCMI? So, CCMI was established back in 1998, and since then we have done something called agri-surveys, which stands for Atlantic Gulf Rapid Reef Assessment. So in these surveys, we go out onto the reef on potentially 32 different sites, and we look at the coral that we find at those sites as well as the fish. So we're going out and we're counting the coral, we're sizing it as well, we're counting and identifying the fish and trying to size those so we can actually see how biodiverse our reefs are. And we've done this over 25 years, so we have a really good idea of how biodiverse and resilient the reefs of Little Cayman are. So we do this each year in the summer. Last year, unfortunately, we did have a very curious on the surveys we do this year to kind of see how our reefs got affected last year, but also to see how they are dealing with it and coming back. So, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We will see you next time.